He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Hi, and welcome to Eating Fried Chicken in the Shower bonus episode. And I'm joined again by clinical psychologist, Saab Jahal.
Kia ora, James.
Kia ora, Saab. Look, I want to talk about something very personal to me, validation, because I want to ask how important it actually is to us, because some people seem to walk through life not requiring it. Nothing sticks. They just walk their own path, and every comedian I've ever met lives on it.
Yeah. So let's think about validation as something like glue, right? So it's like relationship glue. Validation from somebody else, external, feels like it brings you closer to them somehow. But validation for yourself, like internally doing that, it's actually like glue for the fragmented parts of your identity that helps them to stick together. So validating yourself helps you to accept and better understand yourself, which then leads to a stronger identity, better skills at managing your own emotions, and less kind of external validation seeking from other people, because you're kind of content with all the validation that you're giving yourself.
It's interesting because the most successful people who I know in the arts over different forms seem to be the less aggressive, the less confrontational. The ones who are most confrontational, I find, are sort of mid-level performers who perhaps don't have that sense of validation fully formed in themselves. And so is that where quite a bit of bullying comes from, Saab, when people don't fully have validation and so seek it from putting down others?
Yeah, I mean, that's one possible route, is that they have very fractured and insecure senses of identity for themselves. And so the way that they get security is by feeling like they have control over not only their environment, but over other people, and externally showing that. And so, this is the kind of the flip side, the dark side of the people pleasing, the self-editing, the perpetual chase for things outside of yourself. The bully may actually, people displeasing, but they're appealing to their own in-group. They're appealing and showing their strength to the people who are kind of like their lackeys and the people who hang on to them. But in the meantime, their emotional needs may be neglected or suppressed. Actually, what they're craving out for is acceptance, really. But they're getting acceptance from a very limited group of people, and they're doing it by putting down others, which is not a healthy way to get validation in your life.
Is validation, when do we become aware of it in our psyche?
We can find ourselves as people pleasers, say, for example, of really just trying to be on the right side of people, or chasing people. You've been involved in some kind of romantic chase, and often the act of the chase feels better than actually with the relationship you end up with in the end. I'm sure many people have experienced that too. It's this kind of perpetual sense of neediness or unworthiness, this desperation to be chosen. I'm just thinking about what it is that you said about comedians earlier on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you're nailing us, mate. You're nailing it.
But in order to feel like you have high value, you need to act as if you have value. So even if you don't feel like it yet, you have to think and act as if you do regardless. And eventually the feeling will follow, because you're now starting to treat yourself with the respect of, well, actually, I do matter, the things that I do. And it's regardless of what other people are thinking. And I think what you're picking up in that sort of like people who are kind of like further on in their careers is a sense of peace that they've arrived at, because their sense of validation is less driven by what's going on externally and this kind of like competitiveness of attention. The attention that they crave is from their own selves. So being able to be focused upon their own creativity and productivity is what gives them their own sense of validation.
I wonder, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak necessarily to this, but is this something that starts off with the relationship children have to the adults around them?
Yeah, we crave our parents' attention. But one of the things that I think that changes then as we become parents is, myself and perhaps other parents too might reflect back on this, is that your past becomes very present in your
Mm,
parenting. How many times have you opened your mouth, I would say, and you've found yourself saying something that your parent would say to your
mm,
to your own child. And if that's happened to you, it's happened to me. You're not alone. Most parents have had that experience. So it really helps to see how deeply influenced by your own childhood experience and how that shapes your approach to parenting today. Your parents were your first teachers. And so,
mm.
it really does matter. And if you're at a young age, you're seeking, as you're still developing your identity, the external validation of your first teacher, your parent, in order to reinforce what it is that they like about you. And in hearing that, you're acceptable no matter what you do. You may have done something dumb in the moment, or you haven't listened to what your parents said, but, the overall acceptance that, you're still a good person, even though you might be in trouble in the moment, is something that lasts with people, and hopefully then can be repeated in their own parenting too.
Is that sometimes why, I'm in my 30s now, and if my dad says something positive to me, it's like, whoa, I've done something really well, which seems ridiculous because I'm also a grown adult in their 30s. But there's this one other adult in the world, and him or my mum, if they say something, is that because, like you say, they're the earliest person, they're the first people who, you learn to have that validation relationship with?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a really good attachment relationship with your parents, then those words matter. What they think of you matters. You know what it's like. Sometimes it can show itself in really silly ways as well. You go back to your parents' house or where it is that you used to live.
Mm.
They'll say something to you, it irritates you, and then you find yourself suddenly catapulted into behaving like a moody 13-year-old.
Oh my
Right?
God, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you go back to your room and you sit there and you curse them out under your breath, and you do the 13-year-old things that you used to do. It's really, really powerful. It can transport you back to those pivotal moments in your adolescence or in your childhood, and suddenly you find yourself in behaving in that way. So really, one of the things that you can be thinking about when you find yourself doing that, if it's not a positive experience for you, if you find yourself behaving in ways that are a little bit strange, is really thinking about what are the ways that your parents had a positive impact upon you,
Okay.
that you would like to repeat and recreate perhaps with your child or with yourself. That's something that you can do to nurture yourself when your parents' voice
Mm.
is not available anymore, either because of COVID and you can't see them, or because they've passed away. What is it that was nurturing you about that you can recreate in those times of vulnerability when you really need that kind of internal validation? Because that's what your parents' voice is. It's that internal voice that you have that tells you, hopefully, that you're a good person and acceptable and that you're loved, and it doesn't matter what you do, that doesn't change.
Can I ask, because you're a parent, I know your girls aren't adults yet, there's still some time left for you, but is it the same? Do you believe it's the same for parents as well? Because I think it's a two-way street with that behavior. When I go back to my dad's or to my mom's, and we will strike up a conversation, and it's often a friend who notices someone who hasn't been in that dynamic. But is it the same for a trap, kind of mental trap that parents can fall into as well when their adult children come back and they just slip into it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, we repeat these patterns because they're what we know, right? And they become something that they become triggers. A certain behavior comes from your child and the parent responds in a particular way because that's what they do, in that situation, because perhaps that's what they had in their own experience too.
That's what I was going to ask, is for a parent, is there also, we've been talking child-parent validation. Is there also parent-child validation?
Yeah, I've had moments where I remember my dad turned around to me. I think I was a late teenager. I think it was an early adult. And he said that his dad was pretty much absent most of his life. Like, he was a really good grandfather to me when he was alive. But my dad said that he was absent in his life and he did not know how to be a father. And that I was a mystery to him half the time that I was growing up. And I remember being really moved and saddened by that, but then also grateful and figured out what a great job that he had done in the experiences that he'd given me. But I also recognized that, my mum and dad had it tough in the UK. They were working 3 jobs between them to give us what we needed to do. They were immigrants to the UK. And my 4-year-old turned around to me the other day and said that she wished that she spent more time with me. And it's been a tough time. Everybody's been working really hard around, the last 2 years or so. But it did give me cause to just step back and say, what am I repeating here in my own experience of parenting? And is that necessarily a good thing? And then just the other day, she turned around and she said, Dad, I really, really, really love spending time with you, after we managed to spend some time together. And I changed my work patterns a little bit recently so that I did. And that felt so incredibly validating, but much more than I expected it to. And I think that came as a real surprise in terms of how much I needed to hear that. And without becoming, I think that the danger is that some parents become so dependent upon the validation of their children that they won't necessarily tackle tough conversations with them because they don't want to risk losing the love of their children. Whereas actually, boundaries are really, really important in parent-child relationships. And that's the tricky balance of being able to be available, but also setting the boundaries that are so useful for children to have in terms of how to navigate the world and learning the rules around that.
My dad had a great trick for avoiding those awkward conversations. He got one of his wives to do it. So it's either my mum or my stepmother would have those awkward conversations. The final question is, are there any hints or tips for any parents who find themselves maybe getting close to that line of seeking validation?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we can think about is, was there anything about your parents' approach in relating to you and raising you that you want to recreate with your child, or you don't want to recreate with your child, having reflected upon your own experience? But then, what are the sorts of things that had an influence upon you and a big impact upon you outside of your parenting that, or how you were parented, that may be influencing your parenting now? So things like financial insecurity or parental mental health issues, often they can show themselves up in a fear of, being in a precarious position financially, or perhaps a worry that somehow your parents' mental health experience is going to show itself in you, because now you have a child, and this is perhaps when it became apparent in your life too. So really being aware of how you may be expecting certain things to happen, which aren't necessarily predetermined, but something that you might want to keep an eye on and be aware of, but not letting it to completely dominate how it is that you are with your children.
Clinical psychologist and a very good dad, Saab Jahal.
Well, you have to ask them when they're adults. Ask them when they're adults. Cheers. Thanks, James.
Everyone has access to data, but only the trained eye can see the value that lies underneath. At any moment in time, BNY Mellon is managing over 110 million gigabytes of global financial data and connecting it all to reveal the unseen value of insights and new perspectives. Because whether you're looking to balance profit and planet, turn alpha into infrastructure, or explore digital assets, we believe that the best way to succeed at anything is to consider everything. BNY Mellon.